Oh, those actors and their little tiffs. Ever since the dawn of cinema, we've had on-set feuds nearly lead to full-on production shutdowns, and there's little chance performer-on-performer drama is ever gonna stop. Heck, somebody has to keep TMZ alive, you know what I'm saying? Let's dig into a few of these squabbles right now. Of course, we gotta start with the most obvious, an on-set feud so bad it actually created a spin-off film in the form of Hobbs and Shaw. That's right, it's Vin Diesel versus Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Turns out Vin Diesel is pretty protective of both his image and his Vroom Vroom franchise, and according to the family man himself, he had to use a little tough love to get the necessary performance out of his co-star beginning in Fast 5. While Johnson's character of Hobbs was certainly a fan favorite, it doesn't seem like Johnson shares the same memories of Diesel's on-set actions.
Or some wannabe tough guy prick who beat a man half to death with a socket wrench.
And despite starring in his own spin-off with Jason Statham, has since stated that he won't be reappearing in the franchise. Not a huge surprise, since in a since-deleted Instagram post, Johnson pretty succinctly explains his thoughts on Diesel's technique, calling his unnamed male co-stars a bunch of candy asses. Never change, Dwayne. The Notebook is generally considered an absolute pinnacle of the romance genre, complete with two of the greatest leads of all time, Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams. What you might not know, however, is that these lovebirds, well, they sorta hated each other's guts. As the story goes, Ryan couldn't stand his on-screen love interest and at one point asked director Nick Cassavetes to bring in another actress to read with him in the scene. Cassavetes, who of course is the son of one of the great actors-directors, John Cassavetes, took the two of them into a room and had them scream it all out. While the rest of the shoot wasn't, quote, smooth sailing, it did go by a bit better, and we wound up with not only one of the biggest date movies of all time, but also a little real-life romance. Gosling and McAdams wound up in a relationship from 2005 to 2007. Speaking of on-camera romance with tensions boiling under the surface, Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, or Romeo plus Juliet, whatever. His Shakespeare yarn famously starred Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes as the star-crossed lovers, with the latter snagging the role in part because of her initial interactions with DiCaprio, and probably because she was 6 years younger than him. Unfortunately, tensions quickly emerged, with Danes calling Leo immature due to his proclivity for on-set pranks. In response, Leo decried her as uptight. There's some speculation that this led to her turning down the lead role in Titanic, although that part's never really been confirmed. Either way, my favorite part of this story is a quote from Showbiz Cheat Sheet, wherein the writer states, "Danes was ready to drink the poison whenever she was around her co-star." Jesus. Say, remember the 2000 version of Charlie's Angels, directed by McG and starring Drew Barrymore, Cameron Diaz, Lucy Liu, and Bill Murray? Man, what a time to be alive. A weird, weird time. Anyway, according to a production assistant on the film, the latter two famously had a tiff of their own. Basically, Bill Murray gave everyone new script pages that he'd written up as a means of making the film better, which, you know, on the one hand, definitely out of line, but on the other, I mean, did you guys see this movie? Big yikes energy. Anyway, Lucy Liu called him out on it, and Murray responded by demeaning her career up to that point, essentially saying that she was a TV actress, and this right here was the big leagues. She then yelled some expletives, and that was apparently that. Moral of the story: don't just switch out script pages without telling anyone, even if you are one of the most famous comedic actors alive. Criminy, just look at what happened to Boss Tanaka. Alrighty, let's do some speed rounds with some fun acty-on-acty hatred you might not have heard about. First up, Apocalypse Now. Okay, bad example, everyone knows this story, but for the kiddos in the back, this 1979 Vietnam War classic co-starred Marlon Brando as the villainous Colonel Kurtz and features a small role for noted New Hollywood actor, director, crazy person Dennis Hopper as a war photographer staying at Kurtz's compound thing. The two of them nearly got into fisticuffs over a very simple misunderstanding, when Hopper told Brando, once the latter had finally arrived on set, that he, quote, bet he hadn't read the book. referring to a Green Beret manual he'd been given on set. Brando took this to mean Hearts of Darkness, which Coppola had been on him to read in prep for the role, and he didn't because he's Brando. Anyway, Brando stormed off and Hopper wound up harassing him for it. Shockingly, Frank Booth wasn't the chillest hombre around. Brando refused to shoot any scenes with Hopper, which oddly enough had been the only reason Hopper had agreed to the project in the first place. Wait, was that story actually longer than the rest? Man, I am really bad at these rapid fire lists. Okay, whatever. Here's a quick and easy one. Steven Seagal. Dude's well known as a larger-than-life douche canoe, and sure enough, John Leguizamo confirms as much when talking about working with the, star in Executive Decision, famously one of Seagal's only co-starring roles and one in which he, spoilers I guess, actually dies. The Pest himself explained that during rehearsals, Seagal came in saying his usual Seagalisms, to which Leguizamo couldn't help but crack up, and then...
And he Aikito'd me against a brick wall, pow, knocked all the air out of me. I was like, what?
Not cool, Seagal. Not cool. Hey, remember Annapolis, that movie with all the cool action in the trailer that wasn't in the actual movie at all? Yeah, that one. Well, it starred Tyrese Gibson and James Franco, the latter of whom decided to take his method acting approach to the extreme and actually hit Gibson during their boxing scenes. Franco has since apologized, while also claiming a different perspective of the situation. But either way, Gibson has stated that he has no interest in working with Franco in the future. This was before the rest of Hollywood basically did the same. On the set of Brian Trinchard Smith's The Man from Hong Kong, an Aussie kung fu flick co-starring former Bond George Lazenby, star Jimmy Wang Yu got along with basically no one. Reportedly, Wang Yu hated white women and had a strong dislike for his co-stars Rebecca Gilling and Rosalind Spears. When shooting a love scene with Gilling, he pulled a prank wherein he pretended, well, hopefully pretended, accounts vary, to eat live flies before their mac-out session. Still, the movie's freaking rad, but not cool, dude. Not cool. Of course, the classic feud, so much so it even got its own TV series, aptly titled Feud, is that of Joan Crawford and Bette Davis, another one that really could just be its own video, but let's keep this brief. Crawford and Davis's feud first started in the tabloids, with Crawford's pregnancy pumping the brakes on the publicity around Davis's first starring role in Ex-Lady. Several major beefs followed. Joan married the actor Bette wanted for herself, Joan won an Oscar for Mildred Pierce, a role Bette turned down, etc. In 1962, the two capitalized on their bitter rivalry by starring in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, one of the few times two people hating each other actually ended up getting a film made, and a damn good film too. The actresses physically hurt each other and both found little ways to antagonize the other. Bette reportedly hit Joan for real in one scene, Joan weighed down her clothes in a scene in which Bette had to pull her, etc. In a delightfully macabre touch, when Joan Crawford died in 1977, and I should note this is probably not true, but I had to include it, Bette Davis is quoted as saying, "You should never say bad things about the dead. You should only say good. Joan Crawford is dead. Good." And finally, I gotta give a shout out to one of the most toxic and yet shockingly not a freaking disaster on-set feuds of all time, Werner Herzog and Klaus Kinski, whom I'm including here because there are just too many director-actor feuds not to include the best of all time on this here list. Plus, Herzog is technically an actor, and I could probably come up with some film school babble about how his endless drive is a character in its own right within the movies or some garbage, but point is, these guys were at each other's throats for much of their careers, to the point that on the set of Aguirre, The Wrath of God, the natives working for the production offered to kill Kinski for Herzog. He declined, of course, since he needed Kinski to complete the movie. Okay, just in case you feel cheated by that last one of the many feuds I cut from this list was that of Abbott and Costello. Two of the most famous comedians of all time, known for their work together, spent a huge chunk of their careers hating one another starting in 1945, and yet somehow they kept pumping out classics like Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein up until 1956, presumably because they just loved money.